Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the 13th common session of SunoikisisDC Digital Classics Summer Semester 2019. Today, I'm very happy to welcome our team from Araraquara in Brazil, and I'm happy because I have to say that our first session of SunoikisisDC Digital Classics, I think now 4 years ago, was held from Araraquara in Brazil, when I was invited for a week to talk and to present different topics about digital humanities and digital classics. And our colleagues and friends from Brazil, they have been contributing a lot to this program in these years, and today, again, they are here with their projects. So the topic, now I will introduce, of course, them, and the topic today is about, of course, digital classics, and the title is Diverse Comparative Studies and the Digital Classicist Work, and then we will see the work on Ancient Greek, Portuguese, and Brazilian Sign Language. And you have the session outline on GitHub, as usual, with a long description of this presentation, readings, many different links, further readings, and there's also an exercise that will be discussed later during the session. And our colleagues today are Anise Ferreira, she's professor of classics at UNESP, the Universidade Estadual Paulista, I apologize for my pronunciation, at the campus of Araraquara, and her collaborators, Caio Camargo and Michel Reis. And they are going to present today, and they have different also topics, and you have a description about them in GitHub. So welcome again to Sunoikisis, and I think that Anise is starting today.
Okay. Can you see me?
Yes, perfect.
Okay.
I can hear and see you. Yes.
Okay. So, Monica, thank you again for this opportunity. I'd like to begin that in Araraquara there is not a graduate program formally and exclusively meant to classics, but one for linguistics and Portuguese language. Another for literary studies, which receive students from the major in Greek, Latin, linguistics, and modern language. I have to do a linguist program in its thread of language teaching and learning and acquisition. I'm going to share my screen now. So I'm going to talk later about one kind of exercise that can be done with Portuguese-speaking students, but my slides have their own life; they are changing by themselves. But the plan is that Caio will going to talk first about digital resources for Portuguese and Brazilian Sign Language in translation, focusing on middle voice of Greek verbs. Then Michel is going to talk about partiture, Esmeralda, with oral interviews and the analysis through language of digital humanities and classics work. And then I will talk about tools for showing equivalences and contrasts in terms of ancient Greek texts with eyeliner of face, and you got it. Now I am going to give the floor to Caio. He is going to begin. I'm going to stop my sharing.
Okay. So Caio,
and I mute myself.
Yes. Okay, excellent.
Thank you, Anise. Thank you, Monica, for inviting us. I'm really happy to be here, sharing a little bit of my recent research about ancient Greek and Brazilian Sign Language. I'm going to share my screen just for you to follow up with my slides. So here we go.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my research talks about comparing ancient Greek and Brazilian Sign Language, and also bringing digital technology to help me find some of my scientific results. So the first question I've made is how to bring together Brazilian Sign Language and ancient Greek. It sounded a little bit difficult and a little bit impossible, maybe at first sight, but I had the opportunity to work with deaf community people over the past years, and after I graduated in Brazilian Sign Language, I decided there is a huge cultural universe when we talk about ancient language, and especially for us in the Western world, Greece has such a big importance. So I want to bring all this material to the deaf community, also helping them with the study of Brazilian Sign Language and digital technology. So how to bring them together and how to bring the digital technology to my research. That was the main question I've made. And here I'm going to show you the paths I've been through. First path will be in ancient Greek, then Brazilian Sign Language, then technology. So first, about the theoretical basis that I've used to study the ancient Greek middle voice was a study from Professor J. Allen, who is a professor in Amsterdam, Netherlands. He has a PhD thesis about the Greek middle voice, in which he studies using a cognitive approach. So based on that, I've studied the middle voice and became to translate to Portuguese, to analyze examples in different corpora. And then I came up with the Apollodorus corpus, a book called Library, in my PhD work. So after that, I was really familiar to the middle voice, different uses. And because of that, I wanted to know if I could compare the middle voice in Greek to Brazilian Sign Language. Talking about that, the sign language, I've used Quadros studies. Ronice Quadros is a professor in Brazil, in the south part at Federal University of Santa Catarina. She's one of the most important researchers in Brazilian Sign Language and has an extensive work of syntax and morphology of the Brazilian Sign Language. And then the corpus, after I worked with Polidor's book, I decided to choose another book that had no Portuguese translation, because I was also going to offer a translation of a Greek author. And I came up with the idea to study Pausanias, who has a huge book called Description of Greece. It has 9 parts, and I decided to work with the first one called Attic, and said that's all you're gonna see here. So the first step of my work was how to understand the ancient Greek middle voice. Basically, we have in Greek 3 verb voices: active, passive, and middle. Different from modern language like English, Portuguese, or Italian, where we have active, passive, and reflexive. The reflexive in modern language is a type of the middle in Greek, but not only. The middle voice in Greek is characterized by a semantic feature that we call subject affectedness. So somehow in a Greek sentence, the subject is affected by the process expressed by the middle verb. So for example, if I say I'm dressing my kids now, it's active voice. If I say I'm being dressed by someone, it's passive. But in Greek, if I say I'm dressing myself now, that would be one of the types of the middle voice. And based on that, I came up with different classifications, so 7 classifications: process, mental process, reflexive, movements, reciprocal, active speech, and perceptive. So I had all these groups of middle to classify it, and then it was time to go to my second step. Before that, here's an example in a Greek sentence with Greek middle verb and English translation. So it's a reflexive middle. So after defeating the lion, he dressed himself with the skin. Dress himself, it's written in the middle form in Greek. That's a passage from Hercules defeating the Nemean lion in Greek mythology. So my second step was to understand, to study, and to analyze the Brazilian Sign Language. Basically, just to maybe many people listening to us are not familiar to the Brazilian Sign Language. It's a language from the French Sign Language. Over the 19th century, a French Sign Language professor, came to Brazil with the sign alphabet, and he started teaching that. And then after a few years, the Brazilian Sign Language was born. And basically, we divide all the signals in 2 groups, iconic and non-iconic. Iconic means that sign you're going to reproduce tries to imitate the real thing that it means. So, for example, butter, the way you express the sign butter, it really imitates if you were using butter to a bread, for example. But sometimes it's non-iconic. It's the verb to know someone has no relation to the real meaning of the word. So I'll just show in a bit. And the Brazilian Sign Language has 5 parameters to compose the meanings. So the parameters are hand configuration, point of articulation, movement, orientation or direction, and face or body expression. So my idea was, can I find the Greek middle voice semantic feature, subject effectiveness, in one of these parameters? So maybe somehow, when translated to the Brazilian Sign Language, a Greek word could have the subject effectiveness marked or seen in one of these parameters. That's what I've been researching, trying to find out in my corpus. So here are some examples of the Brazilian Sign Language words and signs. So the first one means happy. The second one means sad. So you have to change your face expression when you say happy and when you say sad. You cannot, just like a bad actor, the same face for panic and happiness or anxiety. You cannot keep the same expression. You have to change, because otherwise it's grammatically wrong, and the deaf person looking at you won't understand. The third one means to have sex. The fourth one means thief or to steal. And then we have helicopter, and at last motorcycle. So that's those are a few examples how the parameters can be identified. Just like here, if someone is beautiful, you just put your hand in front of your face and then you close your fingers. So beautiful. But if someone is really, really, really beautiful, you just start doing that repeatedly and fast. So, oh, he's so beautiful, and just keep closing and opening your hand repeatedly. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen just to show you this a little bit. So can you see me?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so this is the sign for happy. So you have to use your body face expression like that. But if you're sad, you have to change. So you can do like that. So that's sad in Brazilian Sign Language. So this is beautiful. But if someone's really beautiful, and you change your face expression as well. So that's how the Brazilian Sign Language works. And
Thank
considering
you.
that,
Yeah.
considering that, there and here we come with the third step. So we're at Sunoikis. So where's digital technology, Caio, while you're researching all this stuff? So first thing, my corpus analysis was all made using computer tools. And how? The middle voice in Greek is morphologically marked. So the endings of the verb will show if it's an active or passive or a middle form. I've used a software called Anticonc to make word lists. So these word lists would help me to find out all the middle verb occurrences along the text. And also, I'm using UGARIT platform to make a translation from Greek to Portuguese to the Brazilian Sign Language. So here's an example of the Anticonc interface. With a word list, I just can put away nouns, adjectives, particles, prepositions, adverbs, and then come up with the middle forms. And then if I just click and choose a verb, it will show me the context, the entire sentence to be analyzed. And here's an example of part of the Pausanias text in Greek, and then the Portuguese translation that will be aligned and discussed. There will be a third column for the Brazilian Sign Language, but we have a problem here, a few problems actually. The first problem is the Brazilian Sign Language is an official language in Brazil since 2002, but it's not taught. You cannot find a Brazilian Sign Language in public schools or private schools. No one learns or studies like at school. And deaf people in Brazil have really problems with Portuguese. So they're not very fluent in Portuguese. They don't have Portuguese as a second language. So because of that, they usually use films or videos to translate only sign. But there's also what we call the sign writing, which is the Brazilian Sign Language written. So like that, you have to use the sign language using all the parameters here and in a written form. So, but that's not very common along the deaf people community. So I'm having a little bit of difficulties to translate, but there's a deaf teacher helping me. But also I have to program all these characters to be shown in a UGARIT platform, for example. That will be my last step in this research. But coming back a little bit to the middle Greek, middle verb forms, these are the results in Pausanias text, so all the occurrences, and using the classifications of the middle verbs, process, mental process, and so on. And subject effectiveness can be identified in at least one of the elements of meanings or parameters in Brazilian Sign Language. So usually I can find the subject effectiveness at face or body expression in Brazilian Sign Language. That's really interesting because, for example, if I just say in Brazilian Sign Language, someone is fighting someone, it's different from I'm fighting someone. So the body expression will change and the emitter will keep pointing out that he's directly involved in that process. And there is only one case of middle form that subject effectiveness cannot be clearly marked, the displacement one, but all the others will be somehow marked or by the direction or the body or face expression in Brazilian Sign Language. And here are some reference for you to take a look then. And that's what I've prepared for Sunoikis today. So thank you a lot, Monica, and all my colleagues.
Thank you, Kai. It was extremely interesting and really, well, congratulations about that, because this is really a great work, and I think important for many people, really helping them. And also this is about the complexities of Brazilian Portuguese. This is always, I apologize for my ignorance in this, and I'm asking you because you are from Brazil. So we say you speak Portuguese in Brazil, but we have a Brazilian Portuguese, and then is, I think, a group of dialects. Can I use this term, or can you explain? I think we have a few minutes just to know a bit more about this, because usually we say Brazilian Portuguese, but what do we mean by that? If I can ask this question, which is, I know, a big question.
Yeah, well, we usually say it's one language, it's Portuguese. Yeah, but we share some difference from the Portuguese or Angola or Mozambique, and so we use the term Brazilian Portuguese, even though there is an orthographic agreement made a few years ago. But that's the way we consider for separating the difference, vocabulary difference, and some syntax difference between them. But it's still Portuguese. So
okay,
okay.
No, okay. Now I understand. Thank you. Yes, exactly. That's why we say, of course, it's Portuguese. And another thing, when you said deaf people, they have difficulties in, if I understood correctly, you said they have difficulties in understanding Portuguese. You mean that because I think that usually they should try to read when other people talk, they read the mouth and the lips. And this is what they have difficulties in understanding Portuguese. What do you mean by that? Sorry.
Yeah, for example, if a deaf person goes to school, he has to read the lips of the teacher. So
yes,
he won't be able to study Portuguese at school. So the Brazilian Sign Language is his mother language, so the first language. But when they have no Portuguese courses, so they just understand a few words compared to the signs. So for example, they read a word for television and they just associate with the sign, but most of them, I think over than 90%, cannot read sentence or write in Portuguese because they have not been taught.
Yeah. Okay. No, now I understand. And unfortunately, this is, of course, a problem for deaf people in other languages, not only in Brazil, of course, for Italian, French, German, for other languages. And so I think that this session is important also in this sense, because we want to help people, and maybe our digital resources can be a good way for helping them also. Yes, definitely to learn to read lips. That's true. So thank you for this, really.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah.
No, yeah, that's important for Ugarit, for example. When you align the translation for deaf people, it's going to be very helpful to see how a Portuguese sentence is built and how the meaning comes up. So that's the importance of the line translation.
Yes. Now I understand. No, that's super interesting. Okay, so definitely we would like to have other sessions about that, and maybe that's the thing, using Ugarit. I have never thought about that, but we can use Ugarit because you can read the alignment, but we should align audios, and audios in this case, of course not, but videos. Videos where you can see a person. I'm thinking. So now we have another idea for our textual and translation alignment. So we also need a video alignment in some way. So that's super interesting. Really, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, but now we have to go on because our session is really very rich, and I don't know who is going to present now. Anise? Yes, I think Anise.
I'm going to give the floor to Michel. He's going to present now.
Okay. Yes.
Hello. First, I would like to thank you for this opportunity, and I will screen my share now.
Okay, perfect. Yes.
So my presentation is entitled Analyzing the Work of Digital Classicists with Partiture. So I begin my presentation providing the overview of the topics that I'm going to explore. They are three bigger topics as the problematization of my research. Then I'm going to speak about the two theoretical frameworks that I'm based on. And finally, the last topic concerning a more practical approach, which is the use and demonstration of partitura Esmeralda for transcription and annotation of my collected corpus. So my research assumes that classicism is a type of work like no other. I mean, we can speak of a class of workers who shared some points in common in their studies, teaching, and research, such as, for example, the most general theme is the entire culture heritage of the ancient Greek Roman world and its various forms of manifestation. The methodologies are well determined, and the material support for study and publication is based on papers printed editions. Thus, to understand the function of this group, we have the possibility of observing the work situation, in which the research would watch and record the day-to-day of the workers, and then analyze the performed actions. But the observation is not enough to have access to all the instances of the work, because the analysis could be so much subjective on part of the research. So if we based also on the text of the professionals, it's possible to have the perception of the workers and not only of the research who is investigating this phenomenon. In other words, what the research is seeing, the worker can see in another way, in another perspective. And the language is a way to achieve the understanding of the work. However, texts are the medium around all the work instances, parts of the empirical material related to this broad sense of work. So, it's important, but first, it's important to think about the motivation of this research. It was noticed a growth in the team that involved technology and the classicists. This can be seen from conferences, projects, and the research centers dedicated to the digital humanities and digital classics. Here I bring a simple example of the idea of the digital classicist. This is a passage from the Digital Classicism website. Here I would like to emphasize the use of some words. The first is community, because it involves the sense of them more than an element or individual, and the share of something. As I'm speaking of work, we can ask who composed this community, what the object of their work is, and how they work. So, if they are a community of work, how do they work? Start from the observations and growth of topics related to the digital technologies. The main research question is, how is the digital classicist work characterized? The hypothesis is that the work of the digital classicist is linked to themes such as sharing, teamwork, and open access. These themes would be evidenced by the use of the other words. Sharing is connected to data generation, infrastructure, knowledge, teamwork connected to the professionals from different backgrounds, students and collaborators, and open access is connected to linked data, open access, standard languages. All this added to the application of the digital methods. Again, I have emphasized that is a hypothesis. These issues could be some potential features of the digital classicist work. To verify if they occur, it's possible to consult texts that speak about the work of the classicist. So this is the idea, the hypothesis. The digital work could bring these themes, words in our text, in their text. What is one of the things I'm trying to verify in the text? And for answer that, I'm based on the next theoretical framework. The first one is related, the first one is the social discursive interactionism by Jean Blanquart. And the social discursive interactionism is a theory based on text and discursive linguistics, which understands the language from social perspective as a communication activity, as it highlights the relevance of language with a focus on social interactions. This view is based on Voloshinov's and Bakhtin's theories on language and social interactions, and on Vygotsky's development theory. The second theoretical framework is from the Decline of the Activity. The Clos and Feitas concept of work considers that work is composed for the prescribed, performed, and what was planned, but not performed. Thus, language is important in this context because it is linked directly to what was planned, and in this sense, Clos and Feitas use the linguistic analogy for the use of genre of text by studying the work. And so, in order to understand the work of the digital classicists, we can collect data from the official documents produced by institutions, page on internet, and in addition, we can conduct interviews such as the instruction to the double and self-confrontation developed in the word science. The instruction to the double I'm going to approach in the next slides. And the self-confrontation consists of a recording, a subject in a work, and then the worker together with the research watches the recording. And the worker is asked about their actions by the researcher. So he must explain why his attitudes. Besides, the work can be studied through a qualitative analysis of keywords available in documents in a web page, which will be the next step in my research. Finally, after participating in the NIH Institute at the Tufts University last year, I decided to use the Part2 tool to perform the transcription of interviews and the instruction to the double and the annotation of them, as well we see later. So in summary for my proposal, I use interview as data and the Part2 for transcribing and annotating my data. So here I begin my third part of my presentation, which is more practical talk about the use of tool. Xmarauda is a system that is developed by the University of Hamburg. It's a system for working with oral corpora, and it consists of transcription and annotation tool, which is the Part2 Xmarauda. So I used the Part2, and that is available on this link here, xmarauda.org, and its download is free. And Part2 has a lot of features that you can use according to your needs, and the main feature is time-aligned transcription of digital audio or video, and the flexible annotation. So, here I show you the interface, Part2 interface. It's important to say that the part 2 is a complex tool with many features, but anyone can manipulate it according to their research needs. For my presentation, I will give you only a quick sense of how it works and how it was used in the research. So, well, here, so this is the interface before you start any transcription or annotation. There is above we have the program menu, below the main comments, and this part, white part is reserved for multimedia, audio or video. And in this gray part is the part for the transcription and creation of annotations, annotation layer, which are called here tier. Which row here is a layer which the research can create to make his annotation according to the category of analysis. So to start a project, you must first select the media to be important if applicable. To do that, you must select transcription here, then the record option to associate the file with this project. When you do that, the program interfaces will look like this image here, in which there is audio, sound waves here, and the time. At the bottom here, there are commands for controlling audio, such as start, playing, repeating passage, return, among them. So below there is a change in the transcript part if we compare to the last slide, because the second grid column now turns red, indicating the remaining time to complete the audio transcription. The next step is to create the layers for transcription and annotation. To do that, you must select transcription again, and then the speakable option for determining the speaker in the transcription, as we see in the next slides. To add more layers for annotation, you must select tier in the main menu or in the command here. And then you can start your transcription by following the time count above. Here in the first row, each column will indicate the text corresponding to the time interval. Once the annotations are finished, you can import them into a variety of formats like chat transcription, XML, and others, in order to be used in other systems. Well, I think in summary, this is how the program works, and this is the step to begin a project for annotation. So in this picture, I have an example of annotation of the instruction to the double. But first, it's important to look at the features of part 2. After adding the audio or the video to be described, you must configure layers here, and the transcription, speaker, general infrastructure text. After, in order to annotate your project. According to my research, I have determined my specific layers. So the first layer would be the audio transcription. The second, the layer speaker is the second layer speaker address which individuals are involved in verbal interactions. And the last layers are created based on the social dispersive interaction theory for my text analysis. And the fourth layer is to determine the type of speech sequence, whether is narrative sequence, argumentative, explicative, dialogical. And the last one is the initiative mechanism, that establish the programmatic coherence of the text and allow to establish, among other elements, the voices expressed in the text. Who says what, if the voice is an empirical subject or a social voice. And so this is the general idea for my prescription. And in the next slides, I bring a few examples. Here I bring an example of the interview. When the teacher was asked about the relation between research and teaching during the class, he says, I have always been trying to combine both, not more than before, because digital humanities have a strong connection between teaching and research. Because we need to produce a lot of data, digital data, and so we have the idea to help students to work on the data and to produce them. Here the teacher begins his speech in the first person, stating that he tries to combine research and teaching. He begins his speech from a personal experience, and then he moves from a personal voice, from a particularized action, to idea of we, of the collective digital humanities, and the need in its field, which is the creation of digital data. Here, we is used as a generation. There is not the implication of the subject and the actions itself. The second thing is the use of expression always in normal form. Involve the combination of research and teaching in his classes. The teacher sees today a great need to put the students more activity as research explorer and producers of digital data. So this is an example of the annotation in voice here in initiative mechanism, like first person. The second example is define methods. It's about the following speech. Research is always exciting and frustrating in the sense that, especially in digital humanities, because we have still to define methods in some way. Here we can highlight 2 points regarding the initiative mechanisms. They can be the voices that are representation, positioning of someone on what was stated. As I showed in the previous slide, in the second element, which is the modalization. It consisted of expressing evaluations on some aspects of the theme addressed in the text. In this passage here, we have 2 different types of modalization. The first is the evaluative modalization, because when the teacher says research is every day exciting, frustrating, he expresses an opinion, a subjective judgment on this activity, on his activity. The teacher's feelings and digital humanities area. So there is the second modalization. In the passage, we still have to define method in some way. There is a deontic modalization, but what does it mean? The deontic modalization is evaluation that mobilizes social values and are related to the obligations and the rules. Here, to resolve open questions, researchers are required to think of establish new methods. So this is my annotation concerning this passage about the work of the digital classicists. The third and last example is about the environments in which humanists and digital classicists have been working. Although we cannot reduce from the geographic space, research works and data in the digital humanities are not limited to the geographical space, but they can be offered and formed in the online environment in which a digital data is shared and work collaboratively with people in different geographical communities. One example of this is the SunoikisisDC initiative, platforms of FAIL, Pelagius, and others we need. These were points that approach. There are more topics, but for now, I believe this is enough. My analysis is going to continue, and I intend to follow an analysis based on categories by social discursive interactionism and the clinic of the activity. So I intend to follow this procedural level. When we can see in this schema, I began to analyze from the superficial and immediate levels of the text to the deeper level, what is semantic level, in which the actions of the subjects are interpreted. But before that, there is the initiative level as the voices and modelizations that I have discussed earlier in the examples. Well, I think these categories can be applied by using part 2 to analyze my transcriptions. So I guess that's all for now. And here I have my reference, and I give my turn to Anise.
Well, one thing, if I can comment, Michel, thank you very much. And I have to say that Michel joined our department last winter for the winter semester in Germany, and he was working on this project, I remember, because I participated also in these interviews, and so I'm happy to see now your results and so your work, and I remember, so and it's funny to see now, but no, it's interesting, and given that, well, I don't know if I can say that, but I was one of the people who were interviewed. So it was an interesting exercise also for the person who talks in the interviews. And so it was a good exercise to think about our work, okay, as teachers and researchers. So Michel, thank you. It's good to see your work now. But I think we have to go on with Anise.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, here I am.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah, in the Michel's analysis, there is a part of contextualizing the source of interviews, like data. I would like to complete this, and so we keep the subjects or the participants anonymous, unless the person wants to be recognized in the data. So research ethics, maybe. So, but let me tell about what I'm going to talk. I'm going to share.
So sorry for mentioning the fact that part of the work was done in Germany, but anyway, no, I know. And Michel was yeah. No, Michel was very clear about that, and I know. So of course, that there are specific, as you said, so rules about that. So I know that because he explained. Well, I was part of the work, so I don't say other things, but of course.
We didn't know if you wanted to explicitly say that you participating in the interview, so that's why he didn't mention your participation. But Yes, it was a very important stay. Michel had, it was wonderful for him, and I would like to publicly express my gratitude. So our gratitude. So I'm going to share my screen now again. Okay.
Okay, it's perfect. Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to talk about translations and one kind of exercise that can be done with translation alignment tools with Portuguese-speaking students. First, I'll say a little bit about some classifications organized by scholars, in particular Mona Baker, who is well-known among applied linguists. According to her, the translators look for equivalences and differences at many linguistic levels between source and target languages: word, collocation, grammatical, textual, thematic, textual cohesion, and pragmatic. At the word level, one can find equivalences in morphemes and lexical meanings. Affixes bring meaning into morphemes, and in derivatives, such as words ended by ikos or oid, a des. The equivalence of the contrast of lexical meaning can be propositional, expressive, presupposed, or evoked. Propositional refers to its information value. Expressive refers to its qualitative effect. Presupposed refers to its expectation based on usage, and evoked refers to what is called the register, which varies according to the context, such as social, temporal, geographic, genre, longing. Also, there are no equivalences at the word level. They are known, such as concepts which are culture-specific, or concept that cannot be lexicalized in the target language, or the source language word can be semantically complex. Distinctions in meaning. The target language can have different semantic hierarchies. When dealing with superordinate or specific terms, we can find differences in physical or interpersonal perspective, or differences in expressive meaning. The collocation level of equivalences and contrasts has to do with a tendency of co-occurrences, pairs of or chunks of words, or to the meaning of collocation, or simply has to do with the fact that the translator has to deal with unusual collocations. In this category, we find also the idioms and fixed expressions, like this, the nema, dia, yeah, by Zeus, right? The grammatical level takes into account the part of speech and inflections. The textual level takes into account the information structure and the communicative function. It's said that languages with more flexible order have less problems when considering a conflict between communicative function and information structure. In relation to that, there are strategies to minimize tension between syntactic and communicative functions. At the textual level, takes into account the way a reference or anaphora, repetition, synonym, superordinate, and pronouns are used to keep cohesion and text comprehension. Substitution, ellipses, and conjunctions are also vital elements for cohesion. Conjunctions are, in a way, attached to thematic flux. At the pragmatic level, we look for coherence. Can the reader's expectations and experience of the world lead to a correct reading of the implicature in the text? Grice says, that implicature derives from some principles which is present in all conversation. The principle of quality, quantity, relevance, manner, and it's possible that implicature may be hard to discover when translating a historical language unless we share similar experiences. The literature of translation studies and corpus linguistics say that parallel and aligned corpus has been helping scholars to search for universals and contrastive uses of languages involved. Also, we learned that parallel and aligned corpus can be a powerful resource to study language and translation strategies. So I bring into the session examples on how some digital tools can help this effort. We'll see an automatic interlanguage aligner and manual aligners between languages. Some of the translation, let me show something. This is the interlanguage alignment tool. Then we will see the iAligner, which is a tool provided by the computer scientist Tarek Youssef, who works at Leipzig. I believe Chiara was also involved in this project. The instructions are quite simple. One can upload the chunks of different translations of the same text, preferably sentences by sentences, or paste them on the marked field. Here on this slide, we can see 3 different translations in Portuguese of the first lines of Homer's Odyssey. Each group of translations has to be separated by a line. Also, there are additional options. One can choose to ignore non-alphabetical, to ignore the critics, and distinguish the case, and use the Levenstein distance. This option results in a more rough comparison. So now, for the purpose of this presentation, we have just 2 translations in Portuguese, although the aligner can handle more than 2. The first translation is from Jaime, second from Antonio Pinto de Carvalho. The red color means there is no correspondence or alignment among the words. The dark green, that words are exactly the same. The light green shows the Levenstein distance in action, aligning not as exact words. That is, for example, the verb saquear in Portuguese in definitive form, and the saqueado, the same verb in the past participle. The yellow shows the gaps in the sequence of words. The arrows, of course, Greek and English texts were additions to compare the language here and the language in translation. So this table shows the equivalence category, the translations adopted, the phrase in Greek, and the respective strategy. We have at word level the use of a different personal pronoun, and the strategy was the choice of the verb, which required different transit, direct versus indirect object. Both translators use temporal conjunctions with the infinitive mood, but has a different verbal aspect. At the word level, we find an exact alignment of names and nouns and proper name, which has correspondence in Portuguese. The andrapolitropon has a semantic complexity in Greek, so each translator made a different choice here. The prepositions in Portuguese were used when there are no Greek prepositions, but inflect terms in accusative and genitive. In order to, here. This table shows more contrasts in the translations at the word level in terms of lexical meaning. We have choices related to information and express value in the case of wondered here. Synonyms that evoke temporality, choices related to a more generic noun, such as people instead of men, in the case of anthropon. Semantic complexity in the case of knows. Inclusion, places are more generic, and regions are more specific when the Greek has only adjective polar. The last choices are related to text cohesion. Gerund in Portuguese, seeing and knowing or meeting, instead of finite and personal verb in coordination, visit and knew. In order to make a syntactical contrast more visible, we have a tree of Bruna's translation made with Arethusa tool in the Perseids platform. The main syntax difference in the sentence is who wondered, seeing and knowing or meeting the thoughts of so many people. In contrast, we have Carvalho's translation, who preferred to be close to the Greek structure, who wondered, visited, and met the spirit of many men. Although the Greek tree bank analysis separated the passage in two sentences by the Greek above the line, anoteleia. So what Carvalho did is translated as a two coordinate attribute clauses with plankte. Now, this slide brings the result of I-aligner for two translations. 21D. First one is from Nunes and the other one is from Malta. The English translation is from Fowler, found in Purcell's digital library. The interesting fact of equivalence shown here by the automatic alignment is the sequence of words mais sábio in Portuguese, which means wiser, and the expression que este homem, which means then this or that man. Also with a table, this table shows in more detail the choices in translations of groups of words. The structure of the translation of the comparative is almost exactly the same, except for este and esse, meaning this or that in English. Another similar translation choice refers to the omission of the conjunction hoti, that, introducing a subordinate clause to complete the verb elogisdomen, translated in Portuguese as falava, that is, spoke or was speaking in English, and fiquei raciocinando in Portuguese, which means kept thinking in English. The punctuation marks were used instead of the conjunction. Another observation refers to a verb that is difficult to translate sometimes, the verb the kindineu in Greek, third person, simple present, indicative. One of the meanings is, of course, to risk. So the second translator translated it as we run the risk, which doesn't seem to correspond to the semantic prosody or the usage we found in Greek in this context. In Portuguese, to run the risk is found in different contexts when there are real risks. The first translator chose a Portuguese expression that is not much used but seems to give better the idea of probability. The dictionary brings us kindineu as a chance possibility and a polite way to say an affirmative answer or something that is not entirely good. We would say in this case it's quite possible in Portuguese, é bem possível. Nenhum de nós dois. With manual alignment, one has to decide, and here we have Alfeo's aligner at Perseids platform. Yeah? One has to decide how many words in sentence, idioms, and fixed expression should be aligned together, and what to do with the gaps. The slide exhibits the Alfeo's tools interface. And this tool can be used to align two texts, either to translations or the source to its target language. Since inside a form, there is a way to send feedback to the students and ask for them to revise whatever they do. Then Orpheus gives us the possibility of seeing the alignment linearity. It does not mark the differences or equivalence, but helps to find them. Here, we see the parallel alignment done with the source language on Orpheus. If you use the source language, you can only align it with one translation at a time. Now, we can use another tool, Ugarity, to manually edit alignments and handle up to 3 texts. One of them can be the source language, and the other 2 can be different translations in the same language or translations in different languages. The aligner will help you to pair translations strategies, translation solutions, and to recognize idioms or collocation. When we have the source language in Orpheus or Ugarity, you will be able to study the source language too. I have to say that Ugarity is a project, Tarek's project at Leipzig University. So, in the context of teaching and learning, the ideal scenario would be the features of Ugarity. If the features of Ugarity could be implemented in the Perseids platform, analyzing contrast and comparing terms or expression in translations and source language. And the list of pairs in 3 different colors is very helpful. And for creating a 3-language aligned corpus and a dynamic lexicon, the tool is great, as long as the alignment was already revised. That's why our students try their first alignments on Orpheus and then on Ugarity. And to compare just the translations, we use iAligner. So I end here, summing up. We are trying to introduce classics to deaf people through linguistic studies of sign language and of digital tools. We are discussing digital classics as a métier or professional style. We are exploring automatic and manual alignment tools, intra-language and between language, to study translation equivalences. Since the procedure is explicit and the automatic alignment helps the manual alignment and vice versa. So, but there is a long way ahead to go just for implementing the sign writing on the tools that we already use in the professional style of the classes, and to raise the interest of students and new graduates in the area. So I will stop. This is some references besides the ones that there is in Sunoikis GitHub. So now I'm leaving my share here. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much, Anise. So
Thank you.
This session was extremely rich of really, well, we have 3 projects here, of course, and as I always say, our community in Brazil is really very, very productive. So I have one question for you, Anise. Can you go back to you showed many examples using these tools for manual and automatic alignment. Can you go back to one example, given that we have the Portuguese translations? Can you show maybe one significant example where you can explain the difference between 2 parallel Portuguese translations? for our audience, maybe also for me,
Okay,
because I don't know Portuguese, and being Italian.
I know that.
Well, being Italian, for example, I could follow the example with run the risk, because we have a similar expression in Italian, correre il rischio. So I could understand that example. But maybe one more example where you explain
Sure.
the differences, because this is one of the difficult things we have when aligning translations. It's not easy to produce a translation alignment. First of all, because we have to be consistent, and of course we have differences among languages. Okay, so now Anise.
I'm sharing. Can you see the?
Yes, I can see the slide.
So this is an example on the different use of modalization, and literally breaks the prosody usage, because it's which level, collocation and idiom, and pragmatics, because of semantic prosody. What is semantic prosody is when the usage can be positive or negative or neutral. And in this case, we see the verb used in Greek in a dialogue, and anticipate one of a statement, right? That is introducing something that's not entirely positive, right? But it's we don't use in Portuguese frequently. We run the risk for something that is more a modal usage, right? So the translator, one of the translator, preferred to use pode bem dar-se que. It's possible that it can occur that it's a very long expression for a word Kindinewey, but it is it's not an expression that used frequently, but gives more the semantic prosody, we can say, about this in this example. Let me see another one. I don't know if it's I was clear about the.
Yes, it is, and it's funny because given that I am Italian, so I can see the difference even more. Può darsi che is an Italian expression, so we have the similar. I understand this example, of course, and definitely I agree, because corriamo il rischio, well, is definitely stronger than può darsi che, and the same in Portuguese. So I can see the similarities.
Yeah. So another contrast. Well, we see that the comparative expression can be aligned better, wiser, Sophotheros, and the second term of the comparison. These are grammatical levels of equivalences. The choice of the choice a sós comigo mesmo, pros e malton. We can use this as a collocation usage, comigo mesmo, but the translators decided to choose a different collocation. And one thing that deixa eu ver aqui. The pragmatical use of the particle man. One translator is really to emphasize the sentence, and the other one sim in Portuguese, yes in English. So this is choices in modalization and at the pragmatic level. Let me see if there is something. From the example, the Homer's example, I think it's interesting because one of them, at the word the morphological level, one is the name Troy, and the other one is the Troade, which is it has a expressive tone and evoke the temporality. It's not used in Portuguese, and it evoked the ancient context, right? So I think this is the main classification, or that we can show this.
Yes, definitely. So thank you very much, because I could also see the non pensamento, spirito, so I can see, and this is a difficult term to translate. So thank you for showing these examples, because
thank you for asking.
No,
I passed it too fast through this table.
No. Of course, we need many examples, because again, translation alignment is not an easy activity in this sense, both for human beings and for the machine also. And then, for example, the problem of collocation definitely is another problem, especially for the machine, really to locate words. So no, thank you. And then in any case, we have the slides. So if someone wants to go back to these examples, we have your tables. It was just for knowing a bit more about Portuguese. So, well, today, we usually we are a small audience, I have to say, in Sunoikisis, and also today I have to say also that Anise is always with us, but today she's not only the audience but also a presenter. So I can comment.
I'm a bit tired.
Yes. So,
but let me say something. Next week, I'm not going to be at Synopsis sessions, because I have to go to a conference in Porto Alegre, and the presentation is at Thursday, so there is no way.
Well,
I can participate.
Sometimes you deserve to skip a Sunoikistis session, because you're always with us, but we will miss you because you always ask questions. But I can, so I think that this session was important, of course, for many reasons, but also because we have concrete examples, starting from, okay, Caio, we have really an important issue here, how to help deaf people, also for learning historical languages. Then Michel showed his work, which is, and again, I didn't want to mention Germany and our group, but I did that because I learned thanks to this project. I was involved, and I wanted to say that because I learned. I was in some way obliged to answer questions concerning our work. Digital classics as a work, as an activity involving many different things. So again, concrete problems, everyday problems we have in our work. And then finally, another concrete project concerning concrete examples, problems when we really deal with the text, with languages. And of course, for translation studies, we have a lot of bibliography and theories, but I think, at least in my experience, that now with these tools, we really face concrete problems. Also because the machine sometimes is rigid. The machine obliges us to align words, and this is not easy. And the other problem is that we need more training data, and I think that this is valid for the 3 projects we have seen today. Training data in the sense that we have to add data for translation alignment, for for the interviews of Michel, and also for the work of Caio, where I think we need more and more data. But again, 3 projects concerning, in the end, aligning data, I think. So,
I would like to comment
yes.
About the alignment with video alignment, as you said. To make a separate the streaming video with the text, right? So we believe maybe the sign writing can help this, but in fact the community is not used to sign writing either. But since Portuguese is already a second language for the deaf individual, so maybe it's useful to learn sign writing to have more access to other texts. Have a translator of sign language. And you know, we don't have in class courses in the English schools, but the universities and the public schools are obliged to have a sign language translator in the classroom if there are deaf people enrolled in the courses. So it's something institute. Caio can tell about more that about how many deaf people we have and the causes of the increasing number of the people to be included, and we hope that classics can, that these people can actually have access to classics too. So that's the comment like about the Caio's project.
Yes, no, I'm not an expert in this sense, but I was thinking that in terms of technology, I know that there are many difficulties and issues, especially at an institutional level, but in every country, I think, really for using these tools. But, well, going back to our small fields, which is classics, maybe yes. So video with subtitles, for example. For example, in Google Hangouts, we have this possibility, and I remember we started an experiment with Portuguese because Anise has collaborators. I remember starting to experiment with adding subtitles, in this case for people who don't have a strong knowledge of English. So we have comparable problems. So the alignment is everywhere for different audiences. So maybe, of course, I'm thinking that it would be nice, but I don't know if it's possible. It's a question for you and for Caio. Maybe next year we can add a session about that with a person who can use this sign language. So maybe we can have a session with 4 deaf people. I don't know if it is possible. I would be happy to do that, but I don't know if it is possible. If why not? Of course, about classics. Caio, I don't know if I'm not asking this, I'm not imposing on you, so please don't misunderstand me.
No,
it's
okay.
just an idea.
It would be very interesting because I'm trying to, we have over 10 million deaf people in Brazil. So it's a huge continent. In my city here, it's around 33,000 people. So I've been developing a method. I'm trying to start with the mayor here, a project in which we can host deaf people to teach Portuguese while they're not at school. It would be a permanent deaf people school to learn Portuguese and Brazilian Sign Language while they cannot find interpreters and at classes. So I have two teachers that work with me. They are deaf, but there's a problem here in Brazil. Sometimes deaf people can teach Brazilian Sign Language, but they have no master degree or PhD to go to universities. And someone who has a master degree or a PhD does not know Brazilian Sign Language to teach at university. So I'm trying to bring these two words together, and I hope for next year we can have someone with more experience in Portuguese and as well as in Brazilian Sign Language and being deaf to join us here. I think it would be very interesting.
Okay, yes, of course. You mentioned a concrete problem, again, a concrete issue. But in Sunoikisis, of course, we welcome everyone who loves languages, classics, and who has expertise. So we are not looking for degrees, of course. We work in the academic world, but really, so in this sense, we are always happy to involve people in general with their expertise. This is the first requirement. Anyway, we have time, maybe, so if there is this opportunity, we have many sessions for Sunoikisis, and so we can do that.
Yeah, may I say one last thing?
Yes, of course.
The question you've made, when we say Brazilian Sign Language, many people ask if it's universal. So if a deaf person can use Brazilian Sign Language around the world. But that's one of the reasons we call it a language like Portuguese or French and Italian, because even in Brazil, there are many linguistic variations for the Brazilian Sign Language. So the color, the green, for example, it's different in São Paulo, Rio, and north part of the country or south part of the country. So some countries have, like the United States of America and Canada, share the American Sign Language. Sometimes they can share the same sign language, but here it's Brazilian, but different from the Portuguese Sign Language and French Sign Language, and Chinese Sign Language, and so on.
Well, this is another extremely interesting thing I was not thinking about. Of course, the dream of a universal language. We can't have a universal language. It's impossible. Because, again, we have another problem of alignment in the end, because a sign language is aligned to, signs are aligned to a language, and having so many different languages, we can't have a universal sign language. And we can see that for Brazil, a big country, an enormous country, where you have many differences. So, of course, I was not thinking about that exactly. So that's why we have to specify, in this case, Brazilian Sign Language. Well, okay, so thank you. Now our time, unfortunately, is over, but I have also to thank you because next week it will be my last class in Leipzig, not in Sunoikisis, but for my courses in Leipzig, and I'm talking also about translation alignment, and I will definitely mention your 3 projects, and also this project for working with deaf people. I think is important, especially for I have young students, so they can learn really how to help people. This is our responsibility, our role, of course. So now, unfortunately, we have to...
Thank you, Monica.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. And so you say that it's your last class because of the summer vacation, right? Not it's because you are going to change places. No.
Is my
Okay.
last class of this semester. Well, technically, is the last class with the topic. Then I have another class which is the summary of the course, and then we will have exams at the end of July. So we still have some time before holidays. But yes, we are finishing the semester. And in terms of topic, this is the last session. And no. So we will go on with our courses. So, okay, now you have, okay, we have everything on GitHub. I kindly ask you also to add the slides, but later we have time to GitHub. And we also have, okay, an exercise, yes, concerning, of course, yes, the work of Michel for describing our daily work, and then the alignment from Plato's Apology, okay, using one of the Portuguese translations. Okay, so now we have to stop our session. Next week, for Sunoikisis, we still have 2 weeks, and then because the semester corresponds to the German academic calendar, next week we have a session about the Scaife viewer, which is the new reading environment of the Perseus project by James Tauber. And then the last week, it will be about the Coptic Scriptorium project by Kerry Schroeder. I won't be present because I will be in Utrecht for I will not chair the session. Valeria Vitale will chair the session because I will be in Utrecht for the Digital Humanities Conference 2019. Anyway, so thank you all, really.
Thank you again.
Yeah, I have learned a lot.
Thanks for the questions.
No, it was super interesting. So I really have learned a lot, and I will learn a lot. So have a good lunch, I think.
Lunch.
You deserve lunch now. I will have my dinner with our German time. Okay, so see you, and have a good lunch. Bye. Ciao.
Bye.
Ciao.
Bye.
Bye.